Existence is futile. All is nihility. Okay, maybe not, but my car blew up. My imaginary friend died. My kid said he likes pop music, and the only thing I had left, my obesity disability, got redefined to 450 pounds and up, so I have to go back to work again. But instead of becoming a socialist, I tried to improve my condition on my own. I tried all kinds of things people do to make themselves happy. Studying the natural order, long division, reading, drinking, electroshock therapy, recharging my emplacements, truly unspeakable acts. But nothing worked. Just as I was losing any remaining vestige of hope that the generalized depression I was experiencing would be replaced with happiness, I found something. Something wonderful. Something that would change the fabric of my existence forevermore. I found this two-dimensional donut, this flattened torus of tranquility, this discus of delight would reign in a new era of purpose in my life. I was happy again. Here is the truth I realized by playing video games. This is Rosanne,
I hope I can help.
a Redguard woman living in the Imperial City, the capital of Cyrodiil on the continent of Tamriel of the planet Nirn. She owns the shop A Fighting Chance, where she sells weapons and armor every day from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. After 8, she likes to check out the rest of the market district, where there are 19 stores, including her own. Though she can likely afford her own place, she sleeps on the upper floor of her own shop, going to bed at midnight. When she wakes up, she spends a couple of hours with her dog, who she feeds venison, while eating her own simple breakfast of cheese and bread and other basic foods. Once a week, she goes to the local temple to offer a prayer, but not before changing into something more comfortable, since she usually wears an iron cuirass with leather boots and greaves. The townspeople think highly of her. However, she is quite humble about her skills, saying,
Much as I hate to admit it, Gunwolm knows more about smithing than I do.
and of course, she's entirely fictional. Rosanne is one of the hundreds of unique characters inside the game The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion. Why is so much detail put into crafting a fictional life for a fake person few people will interact with for more than a moment? One answer is that the developer of the game, Bethesda, thought it'd be best to make these fictional characters' lives as believable as possible by giving them such a detailed life. The theory goes that the closer to reality the fantasy appears, at least in certain aspects, the easier it will be to get immersed. Obviously, the game includes walking skeletons, fireball spells, and a functioning government, but including minute details about people's personal schedules is somehow immersive. How can this be? Shouldn't the magical aspects override whatever realism is injected back in? No. This is what is meant by suspension of disbelief. When we pick up a role-playing high fantasy game, we expect magic, funky creatures, and bad graphics. We assume these things are normal for this alternative reality. That is very important. This is not strictly speaking a fantasy in our minds. It is another world entirely which we enter when we pick up the controller or mouse and keyboard. If the people of this fantasy do not behave in accordance to the rules established, that this alternative world is similar to our own, there is gravity, plants, water, all that stuff, but also magic, and all those other fantastical aspects. If something which should behave like our own reality but does not, like if the people, instead of having a daily schedule, a life, just sat around saying the same sentence over and over,
Wait a minute, let me do that one again.
that would take the player out of the constructed reality of the alternative world. It would break immersion. Things must be internally consistent. It is therefore important to keep in mind that immersion breaking is selective to our own minds. Only the experiences which we expect to reflect our own reality, or in some cases reflect the fantasy's reality, like if Harry Potter used a machine gun to kill Voldemort, but do not, are the experiences which break immersion. Those which are clearly a fantasy, but we expect to be this way, are not immersion breaking. But I want to know why we get immersed. Why we want to get immersed. Why is it that we stare at a 2D plane with moving images or look at a page with words and get swept off to another world in our minds? What's the point? To gain some insight into why we crave fantasies, I think it would be helpful if we looked at a few instances in fiction where characters do the same thing as we do every time we boot up Oblivion or go see Star Wars. What drives characters to retreat to another world, and what impact does this have on their lives? Art is escapist in nature. It brings forth a creative vision which allows a mental jump to another time, reality, or place, or it simply challenges our own construct of what the world is. The short story The Secret Life of Walter Mitty by James Thurber, written in 1939, provides a case of meta-escapism, a term I made up, I think, to describe a piece of fiction which the reader can use as escapism, wherein a character partakes in escapism as well, in this case, daydreaming. Because the story depicts an escapist character, we as an audience can reflect upon why we are driven to escape as well, why our reality is unfulfilling in some regard, why we are reading this short story about some fictional character. Though this process of reflection might be subconscious a lot of the time, pieces of metafiction hopefully can show us the reasons, benefits, and dangers of escapism. Though Walter Mitty is not venturing from reality through a TV or book, the desire to daydream and to consume escapist entertainment are similar, since both express a lack of fulfillment of some kind with reality. Each of his daydreams reflects a desire to lead a meaningful, memorable, and impressive life. One daydream sees him as a confident, skillful doctor, but when he wakes up, he can't even back up his car. Earlier in the story, his wife tells him to slow down in the car. She says, I don't like to go more than 40. You were up to 55, which acts as a metaphor for Mitty's entire life. He feels constricted by rules, mostly coming from his wife. She constantly is telling him things he needs to do, which Mitty resents. This is due to his steadily increasing feelings of insignificance, his awareness of his own negligibility, his bitterness towards the world, which lead him to covert aggression, which must be expressed indirectly. He feels like none of the things in his life matter, especially the weekly trips into town, which is the frame of the story. The only place where he can show off his abilities and where he feels significant is in his dreams, which is why he spends so much time in them. His daydreams easily can be translated into fantasies people have in real life and avenues of escapism which can help them cope with inadequacy. Though stereotypical, there are people who feel pathetic who turn to superheroes to feel like they are powerful, or people who are dumb that watch Rick and Morty to feel smart. Walter Mitty is typically thought of as an extreme case, a man completely unsatisfied and detached from reality. But are we really that far off? Though it is true that the exotic daydreams in the style of Mitty, like piloting a plane, are rare, the average person is not far removed from him in terms of detachment. Given that people on average spend about 30% of their waking hours spacing out, drifting off, lost in thought, wool gathering, and that about 12 hours of the day are used to consume some form of media, as well as 7 to 8 for sleep, people typically spend 4 hours of the day fully invested in the here and now. When a break from reality helps by releasing the stresses of mundane life, or allows a risk-free exploration into the unknown, it can be perfectly healthy. Daydreaming plays an important function of the mind. It is a place where we can rehearse the future and imagine new adventures without risk. Allowing the mind to roam freely can aid creativity, but only if we pay attention to the content of our dreams. For Mitty, daydreaming allows him to escape into a fantasy free from the mundane realities of his life. This acts as a cathartic release, or just a way to stave off boredom. But when fantasies begin to disrupt relationships and responsibilities, they can become damaging. There exist two forms of escapism, with different affective outcomes dependent on the motivational focus that lies behind the immersion in the activity. Escapism in the form of self-suppression stems from motives to run away from unpleasant thoughts, self-perceptions, and emotions, whereas self-expansion stems from motives to gain positive experiences through the activity and to discover new aspects of self. It is honestly quite difficult to diagnose Mitty as one category or the other as an outside observer. I think only he, being honest with himself, would be able to say which type he falls under.
I'll take the red one.
The ambiguity lies in the fact, again, that escapism for escapism's sake can be okay. Sigmund Freud said people cannot subsist on the scanty satisfaction they can extort from reality. We simply cannot do without auxiliary constructions, i.e., escapism is necessary, like water. We need more than what this reality can offer us. Can we blame Walter Mitty for wanting more? But at the same time, escapism doesn't have a negative connotation for nothing. Too much, and reality will crumble until all that's left is fantasy, and without reality, fantasy ceases. If Mitty gains nothing from his daydreams, if he does not apply experiences gained or use his rejuvenated mind to bounce back and rebuild his crummy, boring life, then they are simply isolating him from his relationships.